Hello, and thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, Making Sense of AI and Qualitative Research, Conversations on Meaning, Context, and Power. I'm Elliot Jones-Garcia. I'm a Senior Research Analyst at IFPRI, and I'll be moderating our session today. So, as artificial intelligence tools become more common in research flows, qualitative researchers face both new opportunities and critical challenges. Can AI support interpretive and nuanced research? What risks might it introduce? And how can researchers remain attentive to nuance, positionality, and power? So I'm happy to welcome our guest today, Evangelia Berdou, Digital and AI Integration Lead at Agulas Applied Knowledge, who will be drawing on her experience as a qualitative researcher, her recent experimentation with AI, and insights from existing literature. Then our own Ruth Meinzen-Dick, Research Fellow Emeritus at IFPRI, will join as discussant, reflecting on the role of the qualitative and participatory methods in CGIAR's research tradition and what is at stake as new technologies are adopted. So we're going to start with 30 minutes from Evangelia and move on to 30 minutes of discussion led by Ruth. Please feel free to share your questions in the Q&A at any time. We'll bring as many as we can into the live discussion, but for any we don't get to, we'll plan to make sure we address these through a blog. Evangelia will also share some additional insights, some resources in our LinkedIn group, and I'll post the link to that in the chat so you can easily, so those can be easily accessible. Thank you very much for coming again, and I'll pass over to Evangelia. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Elliot and Ruth, for the invite. We've had some interesting conversations, and I hope to have more in the future. So that's a tall order to cover in 30 minutes, but I think these are all important issues, and we need to have more informed discussions around them. So this is like the high-level overview of my presentation. I'm going to give you some background, both personal and epistemic, and what I think informs the conversations on the use of AI in qualitative research. And then I want to focus on some trends and around current practices and possibilities and the conditions for realizing them. And I'll try to leave as much time for discussion as possible. Okay, so I want to give you a sense of, where I'm coming from so that you can better understand what you will hear next. So I completed my PhD at the LSE back in 2007, and my PhD was on how open source software developers collaborate. And I have led and contributed since then to critical and applied research in international development, both as an academic, as an independent expert, and also in senior positions in law firms. And I think it's important to know that I consider myself primarily as a qualitative researcher. I'm also by inclination. And I developed my quant sort of skills initially by necessity because I was interested in doing mixed methods research. And then a bit later on, just because I wanted to get to the more interesting stuff, which was about, around data visualization primarily. But I think my qualitative inclination and training has served me well, and has translated over to my quant work quite a bit, and it has allowed me to maintain quite a critical and informed understanding of around numbers and evidence and what they mean and how they're generated and what we choose to measure and how, who to ask and when and where, all these matter very much. We think about sort of quantitative data sets as something very clean and sanitary, but you see the clean part, don't see the messy part, right? And there's also a lot of decisions and assumptions and bias behind what numbers we choose to measure and how, right? And report. So going next, I think it's important also to acknowledge the context of some of these discussions around the use of AI occur. There are, very legitimate concerns about, over careers and livelihoods and how AI will impact existing jobs and also, the job market for new graduates. And, I hear a lot of also concerns from people who are thinking that they're falling behind, questions over am I sort of developing the right skill set, etc. There are also very legitimate concerns about the real return on investments in AI, right? Given not only what we know about large language models limitations, but also about the motives driving these investments. And it's a healthy debate. There is a third order conversation, I think, but that we sort of miss that is very relevant. And when discussing, how we integrate AI, where and how in the qualitative research process, which is about the relationship between what some sort of academic scholars have termed small qualitative research and large qualitative, big qualitative research. So a good example of small qualitative research is content analysis, which focuses on sorting, organizing, and counting things. And then usually, does that across large collections of recorded communications. And researchers working sort of within sort of this end of the spectrum of qualitative research usually have a statistical background and are also familiar with data science techniques and machine learning. At the other end, of the spectrum, like the qualitative research, a good example is ethnographic research, and people working within this tradition are more interested in shared meaning, and focus on unpacking like people's experiences and ideas, not only through interviews and focus group discussions, but also by immersing themselves in the context where their participants live and work. And there, of course, whole many different combinations of the two and a lot of in-between areas, right? The one doesn't preclude the other. But I think that's important to remember, not the least because small qualitative scholarship and research is more readily, seems to be a better natural fit with AI, some AI approaches than large, than big qualitative research, like which is more on the ethnographic scale of things. Okay. So these are some of the essential sort of aspects that frame our conversation about AI. But also, like oftentimes, and it becomes clear when you look at the literature, is like what we mean by AI is not always clear. And one important parameter that I think has not received the attention it deserves, and it's often underreported in the literature, is how we access language models, large language models. And this is important because different access points have a significant impact on performance and accuracy. So most of us, like most of like the rest of the world, started experimented with large language models via a browser interface, like using ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, all of those tools. And this is a fairly, like, this approach does not, is technically very the barriers to entry, technically speaking, are very low, but it also can be very limiting, especially if you don't know what the limitations of LLMs are, or even of the different tools are. And you're also not aware of some of the adjustments that you can make to improve performance. And these usually come with paid accounts, right? So the second way to use LLMs, which is not so commonly used, I think, is accessing them via application programming interfaces. So essentially what this involves is you connect to the LLM brain from a program that you run on your computer. For example, I can connect to my preferred AI from RStudio, which I use for content analysis. Developers can also invoke LLM and connect with an LLM as when it's part of the program, that they have written for cleaning data that uses Python. Then because of the increasing demand, we now have dedicated applications which you can install on your computer. They're called LLM or AI desktop clients that allow you to experiment with different models. And the reason why this sort of way of accessing LLMs is important is that they allow for more control over certain aspects of the AI's behavior. For example, you can sort of you can set the parameters so that your AI is less creative, so it doesn't make stuff up, and whereby reducing the risk of hallucinations and increasing replicability. And yeah, because of their increased demand, the technical threshold is getting we're seeing I've seen it being lowered. So the third way, which is the most technically demanding but the most promising, is is using LLMs as part of retrieval augmented generation systems. And essentially what this involves is you create elaborate materials for the LLM to search through. So the library can include not only, for example, interview transcripts and documents that you want to analyze, but also details about the context of your study and your methodology. So the AI can look up when you ask a question. And this means that you can get more relevant results. Also means that you can maintain more clearly the audit trail from raw data to findings, which is a very frequent challenge when, in general with LLMs. So one sort of very accessible application that follows this logic that I suggest to people is Google Notebook LM. If you haven't tried it, please do. I think it's a different way of using LLMs. And last but not least, we have, the software tools that many of us are familiar with, like MaxQDA and Vivo Atlas, that are have integrated AI in their operations. We're not talking enough about them. And there's also, I found, a lack of independent studies. They have a high learning curve, and that's understandable, but also, they're quite expensive, which sometimes make them very difficult to use for independent researchers and for researchers working out from the South. So yeah, so I think it's important to, understand some of these issues. Okay, so this is where you come in, and I would like your thoughts on. So the first question, please use the Q&A on what you think like what parts do you think that in the qualitative process that AI can best support? Or you can open the mic.
In case people are having trouble getting into the Q&A, down at the bottom, there's a icon for Q&A, and yeah, if you put you can put things there. Yes, so I see Cornelia.
I see people started.
So, yeah.
Thematic and analysis and translation of interview data. Yes, thank you. Really. Refining questions and then making them more open-ended, automatic transcriptions, analysis. Okay. So, we are aware that AI, helps with yes, that with data processing tasks like transcription and also the initial coding. But an important question is that we have started to discuss with colleagues is, just because we can't do those tasks undertake with the AI does it mean we should make them? And what I mean is there is a value in undertaking the less glamorous aspects of the qualitative analysis and for example, spending some time and with the transcripts, reading through them or hearing the audio or correcting transcriptions, it creates space for reflection and thought. And also there are some aspects of like the more routine aspects. There are some elements of the more routine aspects of qualitative analysis that are essential for building the capacity of less experienced staff. So I think maybe don't have someone manually do and transcribe 50 interviews, but as part of the capacity of their professional growth, I think immersing yourself in those tasks and is essential also because it helps you think better, right? You see gaps, you see patterns emerging that they can inform then your analysis. Okay, so what is the data format, the next question, that we most commonly ask LLMs to analyze in qualitative research? So what sort of data will feed the LLM?
I'll just chime in. I've changed it so that everyone can use the normal chat as well. So we have a nice one from Hazel.
Audio and text, yeah. And chat. Yeah. Well, I think that the main answer here is text. We feed it, content in text. It can process audio, but I don't think we're there yet with especially when it comes to, analyzing many sort of audio recordings at once reliably. And the question is, what we lose from relying primarily on text? We can lose, especially if you have not done some of the interviews yourself. We lose the nuances that come from spoken language, from body language, facial expressions. And good qualitative researchers know that what happens during and around the interview can be as important that as important as what gets recorded, and they will make notes, and they will analyze them as well as their transcript. Yeah. So the third question, what do you think that optimizing LLM's performance mean in the context of using them for qualitative research? To see what people are saying in the chat. Okay. So what people say when they say optimize, right, is mostly about increasing accuracy, scale, and efficiency. And we're not often considering optimizing the LLMs from the point of view of qualitative researchers, from a methodological perspective, which I think we need to have more conversations about. Because it's not just, like how many texts can you analyze accurately. There are other things that go into that. You have to be able to, you should be able to say, well, you should be able to separate coding from interpretation in many cases, which is straightforward in software packages that we use, like MaxQDA, Atlas and Vivo, etc. But it is a danger when you're using LLMs, because you conflate coding with interpretation. But also we should be asking the LLMs and the LLM outputs to be in a format that humans, qualitative researchers, can verify easily. Oops. And when you think about these issues and you follow the developments, you see that the answers to these questions will vary immensely depending on who's making these decisions and on what basis, and particularly also on their level of technical understanding of what LLMs can do and can't do, and the methodological know-how, and also the context of the subject matter. Because I think what we end up having is a lot of technically sophisticated but technologically naive implementations of AI, and a lot of hit and miss experimentations with AI, with a lot of like very sort of experienced qualitative researchers who sit more at the big qualitative scholarship end of the spectrum. Okay, so I want to be optimistic, because I think there's a lot of sort of pessimism that comes around thinking when we think about integrating AI in our workflows. I think there are three types of change that are likely to happen, and we're already sort of witnessing some of these changes occurring. So the first type is the small cumulative gains that can occur from incorporating the AI into sort of and allowing it to do transcribing tasks, data processing tasks, but also there are things that, someone who is grounded in qualitative research can find also very useful, like organizing your code book, especially when you work as part of the team, right? And, just using it to as an intellectual partner for feedback, just to identify gaps in your thinking or gaps in your logical coherence, especially when it comes to research design. And it's just an intellectual and learning partner to engage with and play off. So that, I think, people are doing that at an individual level and mostly, but we are already seeing that. The results vary depending, on your experience and etc. So the second group of changes, I think AI integration in qualitative research can support, which are more exciting, is that it can allow for more effective and adaptive research designs. And what I mean by that is, like, we can begin our research with, having better questions. So, sometimes when you finish a large piece of work, your PhD or your master thesis, you realize, oh, these are the questions that I should have been asking in the first place. So having AI, being able to analyze, do literature reviews quickly, or sort of doing a rough synthesis of the existing secondary evidence can be very helpful in just improving, your questions and hypotheses. It can also help us become more strategic in what data we collect. Not the least because we can, I think, incorporate more secondary sources. For example, like when you're doing mixed method research, and say you want the results of your document and document analysis to inform your interview guides. We often run out of time, and one stage bleeds into the other. So being able to have a rough cut of initial findings and results can be very useful in this way. When you're doing interviews, like being able to analyze, have a rough cut of your interviews, and seeing, okay, these questions actually in my interview guide do not work very well. It becomes a lot easier. And also, in qualitative research, we have this idea of percolation, right? So, at some point, you might realize that you're not learning anything new from that group of people that you are that in your sample. So it makes it easier to pivot and say, okay, and think about, okay, so maybe like you have planned for 50 interviews and done 25, and you realize with one group, and you realize that you're not learning anything new. You can adjust your sample and say, okay, maybe then I should focus more on this group, and adjust your sampling strategy accordingly. So you can more easily check if you're asking the right people the right questions. And I think the third tier of changes that I see, it's something that we're not seeing right now, which are about more ambitious applications of AI, and that essentially change how we explore, validate, and share qualitative data and analysis. Like LLM and RAG system can allow you to have a conversation with your qualitative data, and also, provided that the information is properly, your interview transcripts are properly anonymized. You can share this in a way that allows you to better verify your conclusions, and you can clearly show your audit trail from, the raw data to the findings. So, I think it's like what I want to, the message that I want to convey is it's not just about doing more things faster with less, but it's also using the AI to help us think more deeply or broadly, and be more strategic of people's time, ours and our participants. And for this to happen, for the positive changes to be sort of realized, all of us need to be able to have meaningful conversations and make informed choices about what options are available, what are the implications, where should we use and not use AI, what real gains we have from implementing AI into our workflows, and also about the long-term implications. Okay, you're doing 60 interviews in 2 days and you're analyzing them. How good is that? What is the quality of the analysis, right? How is that useful? And whose capacity are we building? We don't want to be building only the AI capacity. We want to be building the capacity, our capacity, and the capacity of the next generations of social science researchers. And so, for me, it's not just AI literacy skills that are important. It's not just about learning how to make these choices or write the best prompt, but what becomes increasingly important, I think, is the importance of fundamental social science skills, skills around research design, good writing, thinking critically about data and evidence, and ethnography, being able to, the human connection, being able to relate to people's experience and, provide these thick descriptions like Boris was talking about. Otherwise, what we're likely to get is more AI generic, what is sometimes some people call slop, AI slop, which is generic outputs that look, have the appearance of being quite polished, but at the end of the day, they don't mean much, right? And I think that qualitative researchers do have a lot to contribute, but they need to engage more in the conversations, and of course, the spaces for that are not always open. But I do encourage you to just learn more and to seek out those opportunities. And there's the idea that that's often has been quite popular, which about having to using AI and humans in the loop. But I think it's wrong. I think we should start seeing it the other way around. It should be the AI that's in the loop. It's not humans. So yeah, that's thank you. That was my presentation.
Thank you very much, Evangelia. I've certainly learned a lot from this, and I think others will have as well. Elliot had asked me to give some reflections of this with respect to CGIAR research. Now, first of all, qual researchers know the importance of positionality. So let me say that I come at this from the standpoint of a mixed methods researcher trained as a sociologist, so doing mixed methods from early on. Decades of experience in the CGIAR. Now, during that time, I've seen lots of struggles to get qualitative research taken seriously. But for the last 20 years or so, I've seen a lot of respect for qual research by those who do engage. Now, some of this I'm sometimes suspicious is that quantitative researchers started taking qual research more seriously when they saw it was being fed into computers, into computer programs, and that was seen as more replicable and quote unquote rigorous. But okay. But on the other hand, I think we've also seen a lot of real strong gains in the qual-quant engagement mixed methods, where we can show articles where our understanding on both fields has advanced. So, but what is at stake now? Elliot asked that question also. We have a history of bad qualitative work done by people without real training on the method that discredits qualitative work. And so there's a potential here of that happening with all this enthusiasm for AI. And I think that can be compounded by people with low understanding of AI, discrediting AI qualitative studies, as well as people, as Evangelia said, with low understanding of qualitative, just saying, oh, I can now analyze hundreds of qualitative transcripts. We also know a lot about context specificity and where we are working, in particular, marginalized groups, often their language is not in the LLMs. And so that's very important. Also, as Evangelia said, in qualitative work, you do analysis as you go along. And so the analysis is not totally separate from the qualitative data collection. But what I've learned from this seminar and previous conversations is with Evangelia is that AI can be one tool that we can use, not a total substitute, not like AI avatars interviewing people, these kinds of things. So I see there's lots of good Q&A and comments. So let me turn it over, and we can take up some of these other Q&A and other comments. Can you see the Q&A now, Evangelia? Or
Yes.
okay. So up at the beginning of the Q&A, there were a couple, let's see. There's also a couple of questions in the, one question, and I think we'll have two types of questions, some very specific and some broader ones. So one specific question by an anonymous person was, can AI qualitatively analyze a large set of documents, e.g. over 50?
Well, it depends what type of analysis what your research question is, and whether you use AI just for, like, kind of the first draft cut of the coding, or like for more in-depth research. At the moment, I think the first scenario is more likely, yes. And the answer is yes, it can do it, but but how well can it do it, and how reliable is the kind of what the catch is. So yeah, it's like I would not use it as my only tool in my toolbox, right? I would use it for rough cuts, and also in conjunction sometimes with like the other tools that I know of, like how to use, and they have been specifically created for qualitative analysis. So using AI and LLMs is for the first cut, but to not preclude using MaxPDA for refining your analysis. You have to think a little bit strategically and about these questions.
Okay. That's maybe a good lead into Hazel Malapitz. Can you share examples of well done or promising qualitative studies that have used AI?
No, I can follow that up because at the moment it's strange, right? Because a lot of the literature that I'm reading is about benchmarking the AI against humans, or testing its reliability and accuracy, but not a lot of authors get to the findings. Like how interesting the findings are, and how meaningful and how useful. So I have to go back to my bibliography and look for that. But off the top of my head, no. I'm especially like qualitative analysis in the sense of thematic analysis, where you look at sort of emerging content and meanings. Yeah, that's a good one.
And another looking back to the chat, and I'll take a couple of these, but that people put into the chat because I know these have been pressing. But if others want to raise hands to ask a live question, we can do that too. Cornelia Rakitico said there are AI tools that can already not just transcribe interview responses, but also conduct case interview analysis and thematic analysis in just a few minutes. What's your advice in ethically maximizing these results from AI processing?
I'll be quite, I mean, you should experiment, right? I think, but I'm quite hesitant to say, yeah, I think we still haven't got, like, and also depends on what side of the spectrum you are. Again, like, what is the answer that you're trying to do? If you're looking for an answer to a question like, how do my interviewees think about sort of this strategy or this approach? Yeah, I think that, yeah, maybe, you could do that. But if you're asking more interpretive questions, I don't think you should rely only on an AI.
Okay. And there was another in the chat that sorry, there's Charlotte, I can't see her last name, but I find it quite helpful to differentiate between inductive and deductive analysis. LLMs are quite good at deductive coding, where they associate text with preset codes. Inductive work, though, is more difficult, needs understanding
Exactly.
of content.
Yeah.
Anyone else have this
Yeah.
experience? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And then Paige, I see application for AI to better verify findings via audit trail. That will be great, but I'm having a hard time seeing how AI can help refine a hypothesis or develop better questions, not AI slop. Could you expand on this? Thank you.
Okay. A hypothesis, what I mean by hypothesis is like in traditional, like the way things work is like, you come up with certain research questions based on your understanding of the literature. Say if you're doing an evaluation of an organization, you also consider, like past reviews. Actually, sometimes you don't. So, like in a recent example, like I was reading we were sort of developing a proposal, and the organization that wanted this piece of research commissioned, they do like an evaluation periodically, like every 2 or 3 years, right? And it struck me as very strange that they didn't say, you should also look at the results of the evaluations that have been in the past, because that can be very informative in terms of the blind spots, like, are they taking into account what is like emerging, what the lessons that emerging of their evaluations? Because if they're, if yes, that's great. If no, might mean that there's a blind spot that you can't always get just for focusing from, the internal documentation and the log frames and what have you. So this is what I mean by a better hypothesis and a better research questions.
That's a very helpful example. Because from Glenn Hyman, because the person that is putting 50 documents into the AI will likely not understand all the details of those documents, how can we help researchers, especially young researchers, avoid that trap of outsourcing their understanding to AI and ultimately not understanding much? I like that phrase of outsourcing their understanding.
Yeah. Well, it's not just younger researchers. I think everybody, like, when push comes to shove, you have your deadline, you sort of are very tempted to do that. And I don't have a good answer because, it's like this is a broader issue. It's about how the education system is set up, right? And how we help people understand the importance of developing these fundamental skills. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting. We do have a quite specific question: which AI tools can specifically support qualitative research analysis? And if I know that could be a lot to answer in one thing. If there are things you want to just refer us to, that would also be helpful, I think.
It will be. It's just, I think there's no one answer. It depends on what type of analysis you do, what type of what your the nature of your evidence base. I suggest using Google Notebook LM with like public, articles upload, like a selection of articles that currently sit on your computer, and play around with it, because that it can also give you a flavor of what it is to use a RAG system, right? And don't, I think we also underutilize many of the tools that we already have and we're familiar with, like MaxVD and Vivo and Atlas. Like there are many. A refresher course. I mean, it sounds very boring, but I've come across many instances when people are not using those older tools correctly either.
Okay, rich sets of questions here. Charlotte Schumann asks, how about bad quantitative research? In the context of qualitative and quantitative research engaging with each other, I think it's striking how one is singled out and has to justify its bad sheep. Maybe that's a comment more than a question, but if you want to reflect on
that comment struck me as well. Yes, absolutely, there's bad quantitative research as well, and yeah, and because and I've often come across studies that are large scale implementation of AI, like content analysis across many documents, and the methodology is quite unclear. So, which leaves me with a lot of questions. And also, again, the so what, right? Yeah, so I agree. Yes, there are many bad examples of it. I don't want you to think that I don't think there are bad applications of AI used for quant research too. Or
yeah. I'm going to link two comments or questions. Hasib ur Rahman has put, how can researchers mitigate potential biases and power imbalances when using AI tools in qualitative research, especially in developing country contexts? And Shalini Roy says, it seems like qualitative research requires deep contextual knowledge from the researcher. All research does, but perhaps even more for qualitative. AI presumably doesn't have this, particularly if local perspectives from many of the settings we study are underrepresented in the information it learns from. Are there ways to think about how to navigate this? I think those two questions have some interesting connections.
Well, yes, it's absolutely. So understanding the limitations and where to use it and where not to use it, right? I wouldn't use it for doing very involved and in-depth gender analysis, because we know, like, there are, it is biased, like with regards to gender and also other issues. So if you working with marginalized communities, if the what you want to analyze is very much focused around gender, then maybe don't use it for those aspects, and the second question was about, sorry, can you remind me?
When the contextual information is not
Yeah.
in the sort of
we shouldn't be
yeah.
we should not be asking it to provide us with contextual, like interpretation and analysis. This is where we, like the humans should come in. And
So one interesting thing is the Indian government, I just saw something briefly about it yesterday, is actually trying to now gather information from tribal languages and such to feed in to LLMs. And I think I'm sure that will be problematic also, but it's an interesting idea that they're working on that.
yeah, and I think some of the biases that we're currently seeing eventually might be addressed, right? So like I remember, like in the early stages, like when you typed in the same sort of bias was apparent when you used the Google search engine. It's its initial stages. When you typed in doctor, it tended to give you, and so and there's a lot of promise around also open source and LLMs that can be adjusted to incorporate this information. But we always start with a biased knowledge base because this is
So Kaushik Malik asks, while analyzing qualitative analysis help of AI, suppose AI in Atlas TI software, I've seen lots of mistakes in terms of coding. Lots of codes it generates completely meaningless. Sometimes it codes a bunch of words which do not create the meaning. For a good amount of transcripts, it's not possible to do manual checking. What should I do?
Yeah,
to you.
that's a good example, because like I've come across it, and I actually looked into the issue of like, why does it do it? And the answer that they provide in guidance is that you have to have a very clear code book with clear definitions of what you include under this code and what to code and what not to code, right? So this is what you should give, like as someone like as part of your research team. You should already have that. So I would suggest looking into that. It's because it like there's also this misconception that because it's AI, it will work. Well, it doesn't need work, and it does. You have to invest, and in order to make it work, which is also why I'm quite skeptical about some of these studies about the benefits. But that's another issue.
Actually, that's a very good point. That and I think it's also perhaps why there have been a lot of bad qualitative studies, is that it seems like, oh, it's just intuition. Anybody can do this. You can just start playing around with AI, and therefore you're doing AI in your qualitative work. As opposed to, I think you would never start to do quantitative analysis by just playing around with one of the, stata or R. you would actually learn what those techniques are. And I think
Exactly.
we do have a need, and maybe these are out there and you can point us to them, of manuals or guidance on how to do the nitty-gritty of what these tools are. So
Yeah. Yeah, look, I would, yeah, that's correct. And some of the answers are there, but we just have to look for them, right? And because it's not uh, it's part of doing good qualitative research, right? You wouldn't say to an analyst, go and code this, and let them do that without understanding what they're coding, what the research question is what its code is meant to cover. So why would they
right.
work?
Right. That's a very and then Charlotte Schumann is asking, how about the data privacy side? In Europe, a new regulation was just set up to restrict that kind of data, the kind of data that organizations can just upload and then share with tech companies, OpenAI. Is the CGIAR considering building their own agents?
Well, that's more of a question for you, but yeah, data privacy. I wouldn't upload transcripts to the cloud unless you have like an enterprise level sort of account, which provides additional sort of protections, right? Or you have a local LLM running on your computer, which is the direction that some organizations are going, or you work within, like, say, the Microsoft Azure architecture. So yes, privacy is absolutely an issue, and which I didn't want to go into a lot of detail because it could take forever. But people should be aware about all those parameters, right, and what it means, and what they mean. Because even if like say you you have a paid account and you adjust set the settings so that you don't allow the AI to be used, your data to be used for training, your data still stays on that company's server for months.
Yeah, so that'll be a very big issue. And especially because qualitative data is much more difficult than quantitative to anonymize.
Yeah.
People talk about their experiences, and that's quite unique to that person. Very good. I think maybe we have time for one more question from an anonymous attendee. Suppose someone begins with a wrong assumption, for example, believing that people interested in AI's limits and capabilities will not be able to understand the details of their own research. Can AI help correct such assumptions and bring that person out of his bubble?
So can you repeat the question? I didn't get it.
Sure. It's a little complicated. Suppose someone begins with a wrong assumption, and I'll skip the example. Can AI help correct such assumptions and bring that person out of his bubble? And the word "his" was used.
No, why AI would be able to do that? Like AI is a mirror, right?
Yes.
And it's also very sensitive to the way it picks up very a lot how you phrase a question, and so yeah, in terms of unpicking your own blind spots, I would be quite hesitant that that's the best way to do that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yes, I think I agree. And just to be fair, Charlotte says I have to disagree with Ruth on how method strict quantitative research is. I've seen big graphics of surveys done with thousands of people in completely ridiculous settings, e.g. leading questions, gender context, where the statistics might be correct but applied on data that I would consider questionable, to say the least. The visualization graphics then somehow cover up the messy production conditions. Yes. So, and John Hanley, IFPRI's head of IT, says current AI is very sycophantic. So you would have to be self-aware enough to ask it to counter your argument. Because
Yes,
we
you have
brought
to-
in, I'm going to take the risk of going 1 minute over, but just to say that because a lot of gender researchers are on this call, we've put to AI, is gender empowerment a correct term? And it comes back and says, yes, it is, and gives us citations that say that. And then we were kind of upset with that. And Elliot said, well, then you just need to ask it a different question. Ask, why is gender empowerment not the correct term? And sure enough, then it gives us the answer we wanted. So your point, I think, earlier about how the framing of your original question matters. And with that, I should turn it back over to Elliot to thank you officially and tell us next steps.
Yeah, did you have one more last thing you wanted to add, Evangelia?
No. That's I didn't even
no,
give you
it was about the sycophantic aspect that I found very, like, the people who designed these tools wanted to sign up users quickly. Like, and you don't succeed in doing that if you have an argumentative AI. And also the origins I found that very interesting. The origins are service, client service models, right? So that's another bias that we often don't talk about. Yeah.
Well, okay, it's a wonderful point to finish. Thanks so much for both of you. I think I've been hearing a lot of praise through Teams as the discussion has gone forward, and I enjoyed it very much and incredibly informative. So I've copied all the questions in the chat, and so we'll use that to probably write a blog to follow up. So feel free to, any last minute questions, I'll try and grab them, or post them into the LinkedIn community and we can bring them back in. And I've shared a few times this next webinar, which will line quite nicely with what we've been talking about today. So I'll be launching the toolkit that I've been working on for ethical methodologies, with this focus on inclusivity. We'll also have Nyati, who'll be talking about her work with red teaming and for gender biasing LLMs, and then we'll be accompanied by Yona Digital Green, who is a co-curator in this series, and she'll be acting as discussant. So I look forward to seeing you all there in a couple of weeks, and thank you so much for coming. It was a wonderful attendance, and we've still got 90 people at 5 minutes past the end, which is wicked.
Thank
Cheers,
you for
everyone.
having me. I
Bye-bye.
enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.